لا تدعوا أحدا يشك في وطنيتي.
لقد وفيت بوعودي لكم.
لقد بنينا دولة عظيمة معا، لكن القوات الخارجية تريد القضاء على نفوذه.
إنهم يريدون أن يعزلوننا ويفصلوننا عن باقي العالم.
كم من زوجاتكم وأطفالكم تشردوا. لقد أرسل تحالفهم مبعوثا لعرض مطالبهم المتعجرفة. لقد بنينا معا بلدا عظيما على أنقاض البلد القديمة، ومعا سوف نبني إفريقيا عظيمة. ولكن قبل أن يتسنى لنا البناء يجب أن ندمر أولا. ذلك هو ردي على مطالب تحالفهم.
Hi, this is Chris Roper, editor for the IGN PlayStation channels, and this, my friends, is SOCOM 3, the third in the series of Sony's tactical military shooters. The SOCOM franchise is essentially Sony's version of Counter-Strike, with regards to popularity at least, for the PlayStation 2, and is easily its most important online franchise for many reasons. I'm going to start by pointing out right away that although multiplayer is obviously the most important aspect of SOCOM, we weren't able to take any online footage for the video review since the game is only a few days away from shipping, and Sony is running its last batch of server tests to make sure everything's set for launch and everything's ready to go. The footage we have here is very indicative of what the online play is like though, so it's all good. While SOCOM 2 sort of felt like an expansion pack to the original game, SOCOM 3 is packed to the brim with new features and improvements that set it a step above the previous game. For instance, one of the major new additions is vehicles, which gamers have been begging for since the original SOCOM was released more than 3 years ago. The game features roughly 20 transports you can hop into, like Humvees, tanks, jeeps, assault boats, and more, each of them with multiple passenger slots you can hop between. Zipper's done a pretty good job of fine-tuning the handling and control of each of the vehicles, and they perform pretty much about as well as you'd expect them to, in a good relation to how their real-life counterparts would actually perform. Not that we've ever actually driven a tank, but just saying. Humvees are a blast to drive, for example, especially when you've got a guy on the mounted rocket launcher and he takes out a tank while you circle it faster than its barrel can rotate. Pretty awesome stuff there. The vehicles are important not only because they expand the number of ways that you can approach a situation, but because the levels are absolutely massive this time around. Rather than loading any given level at once like before, Zipper has switched over to using streaming technology to allow the levels to become absolutely monstrous. Towns that were roughly the same size as a map from SOCOM 2 are actually but a small portion of one of SOCOM 3's maps. It'll take you a couple minutes to drive from one side of a map to the other in a fast vehicle, so there's absolutely no point in even trying to walk it. This combination of massive outdoor areas and confined cities and spots within make the online aspect of the game feel like a cross between Battlefield and Rainbow Six. What generally ends up happening is that you'll jump into a vehicle with a group of folks who then by default essentially become your squad, and you'll haul ass to one of the map's choke points, hop out, find cover as fast as possible, and generally get set up. Then the game basically turns into a chess match where you're trading shots, hiding for cover, whatever else, Rainbow Six style. It's an awesome mix that combines the best aspects of both games, with Battlefield's massive vehicular-based travel and combat, and then Rainbow Six's chess match style of gameplay. SOCOM 3 now brings online support for 32 players in the series, and for the most part, it works very well. When a large group of folks are concentrated in one area, it can sometimes get a little lag and slow down a bit, though it's not very common and it isn't a very major problem. It's usually dependent on what map you're playing on, as some maps are worse about this just by where they sort of funnel players to. But most maps usually don't have any problem with this, and the game runs and feels just as good as it does when you're playing offline. The streaming aspect of the game does have its negatives, though. The PlayStation 2 is nearly at the end of its lifespan and is obviously showing signs of age, and SOCOM doesn't do the best of jobs at hiding all of these problems. Some of the areas look great, like the more compact villages, the soldiers' vehicles, all that stuff looks awesome. But some of the massive outdoor sections are very limited detail-wise, with what looks like single polygon counts making up the geometry. Sort of hit or miss out in the open areas, but most of the towns and such look great. Like I mentioned, the soldiers' vehicles, everything looks awesome, and the game actually has very, very good looking dust and smoke effects. Great particles all around. While the online aspect of any SOCOM game is easily its strongest point, SOCOM 3 fixes a number of the problems the past games have had with regards to its single-player mode, and it actually provides a reasonably compelling reason to play through it. For starters, SOCOM 3, unlike the last game, has intermission checkpoints. The last game bugged the hell out of us because it didn't have this, and so we're glad to see it here. Most missions have 3 or 4 points, so that once you hit them, they check it, and you'll never go more than about 10 minutes. So, whereas the last game you might have gone for half an hour and then had to start all over again, that's not a problem this time around. Single-player mode also has a fairly good backing story and progression of events. The voiceovers, especially on the military generals that you're basically fighting against, are fantastic. I have no idea what language these guys are speaking, and they might even be talking about last night's 49ers game instead of what's actually being printed at the bottom of the screen, but regardless, I'm sold. The single-player AI is generally pretty good, with guys ducking behind cover and whatnot like it should, but it isn't perfect. Sometimes your troops won't follow you, so you have to tell them to regroup or continue to follow you. And sometimes loaded enemies will hide somewhere and you'll have to search for them out to end the mission. Like one mission where you're basically manning turrets. One of the soldiers, after they killed everybody else, was hiding in a crater, and I didn't realize he was there and had to wander around for a minute to find him. This isn't a major problem, and it's not all that common, but it's still actually worth mentioning. Fans of the SOCOM series are obviously planning on picking this up anyway, and as they should, as it's an awesome game. But even folks who may not have tried the series before for whatever reason, be it that they heard the single-player mode wasn't that great, or they didn't have the network adapter, or whatever other reasons, should actually really check this game out. It's reason enough to pick up the online adapter alone if you aren't to have it. SOCOM 3 is my personal favorite online game for the PlayStation 2 so far, and I highly recommend you pick it up.